I am Dave Schrader, in for Chad Hartman today and tomorrow. I love to share when I uncover something really cool. And I am if nothing, I am a nerd when it comes to my childhood, all of the great TV shows, movies, holiday specials, music, everything and anything. But there's one show that has always worked out well for me: movies, music, and monsters. Dan Monroe, the host of that amazing show on YouTube. If you haven't seen it, go check it out, subscribe to it, hit the bell so that you never miss an episode, because if you're like me and you love insights and fun information, Dan Monroe's your guy. Dan, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Happy New Year to you, sir. I absolutely love your program. Every time one comes up, and you've got such a great eclectic viewpoint from so many different angles, from movies, music, and monsters. What got you involved in kind of researching and diving back into our youth and expanding these stories, letting us know where people ended up, where special props and history of these stories went?
You know, to be honest with you, it happened by absolute accident. Just about exactly 1 year ago, only 1 year ago, I had a YouTube channel like a lot of people do. I had 20 subscribers. And back in the early 2000s, my brother Paul and I became really involved with the old 1965 TV show Lost in Space, because my brother Paul wrote a book on it. And I was always fascinated with the robot. When I would watch that show, you know, it was cool that they were out in outer space with the Jupiter 2 and the Chariot. But, oh, man, I wanted a robot. So make a long story short, I basically contacted the guy who owned the robot. His name was Kevin Burns, and he helped me build my own replica. Jumping forward a bit, a year ago, I put up a video on how I built my robot. And I got a notification from YouTube that basically said, hey, overnight, your channel went from 20 subscribers to like 200. You know, if you can get to 1,000, you can be a thing. And I thought, all right, that's weird. So I put up another one. I put up another one about Lost in Space, and suddenly I was at 600 subscribers. I'm like, all right, there's something here. So I spent about a week studying YouTube channels. What did I like? What did I not like? What did I find entertaining? What was boring me? And you know what I found? Especially when it comes to things like Star Wars, Star Trek, all this stuff, what comes up? Negativity. What's wrong with it? We hate that movie. That movie stinks. That TV show was awful. And I thought, aha, positivity. That's absolutely it. So I started putting out videos on everything that had to do with movies, music, and monsters. I kind of branded it, talking about not only stuff from the 50s, like The Day the Earth Stood Still, but, you know, the Planet of the Apes TV show from the 70s, and even movies that people didn't really like all that much. My take is, you know what? Somebody did like it. I'm not going to put it down. And like I tell the subscribers all the time, which is something that I think YouTubers that are successful miss. We are only able to do what we do because of them. Without them, there would be no us. And I constantly thank the subscribers, and I listen to what they say, and I just truly love the audience. I think that positivity, along with the passion and the production value that I put into it, has really helped launch this channel. And 1 year later, I'm coming up on 150,000 subscribers. How cool is that?
That is very cool, and congratulations. Well deserved. And I love that people like you are still showing the passion. And one of my favorite things that I heard in this last year, Kevin Smith, the auteur, the actor and director and writer, he said, you know, since his major heart attack, he used to be able to sit down and he could dissect a movie with you and tell you everything he hated about that movie, everything that fell short. And he said, now that he realized how precious life is, why waste a moment talking about how much you hate it? Instead, let's shine about those happy moments. Let's look at those moments in the show that maybe are underappreciated. And since he did that, I've really started to enjoy so many old shows and programs and movies that I kind of just, you know, pushed aside in the past.
Sure. People love a car wreck. You know, you drive by and you look at the car wreck, and, you know, it's the same thing. Oh, I'm going to listen to somebody talk for 2 hours on how they hate Disney, Star Wars. Okay, great. But it's overwhelming. And I think the page is beginning to turn, and I love getting emails and messages from people saying, hey, I watch your stuff with my 7-year-old grandson who is now into Logan's Run or the
Right.
A-Team, and I'm like, oh, that's great. And that, Charlie Brown, is what it's all about.
I couldn't agree more. Dan Monroe on the line with us, host of Movies, Music, and Monsters. The Whatever Happened To segments. I love those. You know what? Again, as I'm doing this, my wife is texting me, listening, and she's like, we got to go watch Planet of the Apes. I said, honey, we've watched Planet of the Apes. Let's watch the TV series. I have those on DVD. And who doesn't love Starsky and Hutch thrown into the Planet of the Apes? Because that's how I saw it even as a kid, and I loved that series.
Absolutely. You know, the Planet of the Apes franchise was so popular at that point, they were actually thinking about doing another movie, but they went the direction of television, and it only ran, I think, 13 episodes. But for whatever reason, well, I know the reason, they gave it a terrible time slot. You, of all people, know how that works.
Yeah.
If they had put it on earlier when the kids were watching it, it would have been one thing, but it got canceled. It is what it is.
What has been one of the most surprising details as you've done deep dives into these programs to try to uncover what happened to different elements? What was one or two of your favorite surprising moments that you've uncovered so far?
Well, you know, there are so many of them, but one thing you got to remember is that back then, movie studios and audiences didn't care about props. So, you know, things from movies like the ship from Planet of the Apes or the robot from Lost in Space, you know, a lot of this stuff was simply discarded and thrown out. You know, we grew up with these things, and now to know that they've been found or they've been restored and they still exist, to me, it just touches a part of our childhood that nothing else really does.
It does, right? And it brings you back. And then to know that there's a story to where these things go. And your fascination and love with Lost in Space, obviously, is kind of the germination point of this series. And when you dug in, here's Robot, right? This character was one of the most popular characters on TV, but he kind of got deconstructed and reconstructed numerous times as well, right?
Yeah, very interesting. In fact, you know, at that point, the two most famous robots were the black robot, Robbie the robot from Forbidden Planet, but they were created by the same guy. Robert Kinoshita designed Robbie, and then years later designed our pal here, the Lost in Space robot. And when Lost in Space ended, the cast went on to other things, and the robot went into storage. A few years later, there was a TV show called Mystery Island, a little segment. Back then, they said, well, we need a robot. They just said, oh, take this one. And they stripped him down and they painted him white. And that's how he stayed for years and years and years. And then Michael Jackson wanted to buy the Lost in Space robot. And he went to 20th Century Fox and they opened up the crates and Michael Jackson looked at it, but it didn't look the way it did in the show. It had been altered. He didn't buy it. But because he found it, we now knew where it was. Kevin Burns restored it, and it actually still exists. It's out there.
That is cool. And another one of the listeners on the stylesfinancial.com talk and text line says, the greatest American hero.
Oh, man. Yeah, believe it or not, I'm walking on air. That is one that's on my list of upcoming shows. You know, that's one of those 80s shows that it kind of came and it kind of went. But again, because of the nostalgia factor and the love and the passion for these shows in the hearts of the fans, these types of shows will never die. I truly believe that entertainment today, maybe it's a sign of getting old, but people always say, well, it's not the way it was when I was a kid. You know what? It's not the way it was. You look at entertainment today that is just a huge cash grab, and, you know, they crank out sequel after remake after sequel. People are beginning to go back to these classic shows, and that's what I love to see.
It's a really interesting element of these stories, and there are so many great backstories that just get lost. And Dan, I thank you personally for curating a place for all of us to come together, have a community that's positive, fun, and can re-examine these stories and see them in a bright new light. So thank you for what you're doing.
I really appreciate you having me on.
My pleasure. We'll be talking again soon on one of my paranormal programs, so keep tuned for that. Movies, Music, and Monsters. Dan Monroe, the host. Go find it on YouTube now. Subscribe, watch, enjoy. We'll be back. I'm Dave Schrader in for Chad Hartman. This is News Talk 830 WCCO.